In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
Hey everyone, it's Daniel and Dan, the Last Nighters. That's right, Robert is sick and he is not able to make it to the show tonight, so I have a co-host covering for him who is also a Dan. He is Dan Reed of Culinary Libertarian, and we are not doing Death Wish. We are going to do a movie in the Culinary Libertarian's wheelhouse, Ratatouille, the Disney Pixar movie from 2007. So Dan Reed, thank you for joining us for what will be episode 52 of the show, lastnighters.com/52. Go ahead and tell us, the audience, about yourself, where they can find your work, maybe talk about your show a little bit, and then we'll get into the Google description and hash out this film.
All right. Well, the first thing I want to say is I can't believe I get to be on the 1-year anniversary. This is show 52, unless you missed a week. That's pretty exciting stuff. I do have a blog and a podcast, and all of that can be found at culinarylibertarian.com. The podcast has a separate link, culinarylibertarian.com/podcasts. And Monday, episode 15, I think the big fancy, Daniel's disrobing. The big word in the industry is it drops. Anyway, that's going to be a fun one because it's about a cartoonist who's on YouTube. So I'm looking forward to everyone hearing about that. And so I write a blog about baking and cooking, and every once in a while we take digs on the FDA.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I can tell you that my wife actually listens to your show, and actually, she enjoys it. She said, "Hey, tell him that I enjoy his show, but don't be an ass about it. Don't embarrass me." So I'm trying to do it as tactfully as I know how, and you just witnessed how tactful I am.
Now I know why the office is outside the house.
We have a smart man on the other end of the line here.
All right.
So, Dan Reed, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I know that you've listened to our show over the course of years or months, and we do interact every now and again on the old Facebook and Messenger, and I think we are kindred spirits who are walking the same path. And so I'm finally able to get you on the show. So I'm happy that you're here. And why don't we get into the Google description, which is our normal first course on the menu?
Okay. Oh, nice play.
I'm digging it out here.
Well, that's better than the curveball at football season.
That's right. That was intentional, by the way. All righty.
Say that.
Ratatouille came out in 2007. It's a drama fantasy film, 1 hour and 51 minutes, and I will add a long 1 hour and 51 minutes. Got an 8 out of 10 on the IMDb, 96% Rotten Tomatoes, 96% Metacritic, 96% of Google users like this movie. So this is a highly acclaimed film. I think that, we'll get into it, but I think upon further viewings, it maybe loses some of its luster. And especially after you listen to this episode, we might tear it down a couple of pegs. All right, here's the description. Remy dreams of becoming a great chef. And Remy's a rat, by the way. Despite being a rat in a definitely rodent-phobic profession, he moves to Paris to follow his dream, and with the help of hapless garbage boy Linguini, he puts his culinary skills to the test in the kitchen, but he has to stay in hiding at the same time, with hilarious consequences. Remy eventually gets the chance to prove his culinary abilities to a great food critic, but is the food good? A Pixar animation. Came out June 29, 2007, directed by Brad Bird, and Brad Bird is also famous for doing The Incredibles 2, and also The Iron Giant. So, what is your take, Mr. Reed, on the Google description and anything I've said thus far?
I think the Google description misses the mark pretty broadly. Yeah, it's a rat who cooks. So it seems woefully inadequate.
All right. Well, that is a devastating take on the Google description. I think that as I mentioned earlier, we did this show or this episode on Ratatouille as the Read Rothbard podcast, Robert and I, a couple of years ago. So he's going to be Gusteau's ghost for me. He's going to be a figment of my imagination. And I'll be posting it on the show notes page, which is lastnighters.com/52. And he goes through a really good summary of the plot. But essentially, you've got Remy, who is a rat who has a special ability, a special skill that his colony, his father, and the thousands of other rats that live with him utilize this skill of him being able to smell poison in food. And they use him sort of as, the old, the pharaohs or the kings who would have a taste tester. So that in case he'd be poisoned, the hapless taste tester would be the one to die instead of the nobleman. But Remy would be able to smell it, so he wouldn't actually die as a result of it. But his that was his special talent, and so they assigned him that duty, even though he had it in his heart that he was really wanting to use that skill, that ability to smell something and know all the ingredients that are in it to enjoy food and combinations of food and explore flavors of food. And so that's sort of how the movie sets up his particular skill set, his particular set of skills, where he will find food. And I'm trying to do a Taken thing here, but we'll just move past that. So basically, then there's this other argument between him and his father, Remy and his father, where the other rats are going through garbage to get food. And Remy says they're stealing the food, but the dad says, no, that's food that they've thrown away. They don't want it anymore. But in a way, I think Remy's trying to twist the word a little bit, or twist the meaning of stealing, so that he can say, well, since we're already stealing, why don't we, instead of stealing the garbage, steal the good stuff? And so that kind of came across to me as a very sort of like the commie kind of way, like they want to be in that special class of, well, if we're already going to do something bad, then we might as well do something bad to get the better stuff. So they're going to be the what's this upper class of communist system?
I don't speak communism, sorry.
Like the commissars or whatever, the bureaucratic class.
I understand, yes.
Yeah, so they like, live it up at the expense of the peasantry who are subjected under the rule. So I felt that Remy was basically conflating the two things so he could justify the outright theft, whereas I believe his father is actually more correct in that once something is in the garbage, someone's throwing it away, they're telling you, we don't want this anymore, and it's essentially fair game.
I think at that point, I agree with that. If it's in the trash, it's something that's been discarded by the owner. So I think there's even some legal aspects to this, that there is no legal ownership any longer. Since we presume that the state can go through your garbage because it's not your garbage, it's not your stuff. It's in a bin designed to go to some floating island in the south of China. But that particular theme changes once Remy and Linguini's relationship is really, really tried. And so Linguini breaks his bonds with Remy. Remy's feelings are hurt. That's not an alien idea, but Remy's response to having his feelings hurt is go into the restaurant and take all the food that isn't discarded and actually for real steal the food.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that is his payback to Remy for not recognizing, or payback to Linguini for not recognizing Remy's contributions to Linguini's success. And of course, we're jumping ahead quite a bit. So, spoilers all around.
Of course.
But if I may back it up just a little bit, Remy was already stealing from the kitchen, from the pantry, little by little. And his brother kept bringing more and more of his crew his friends by seeking that access to the pantry. And so he was stealing in smaller amounts initially that was growing incrementally. And he was probably, I think they show him sort of vacillating on it.
Well, like he was stealing from the old lady. He was living in her house, taking her food.
Well, that's the very beginning, yes. Yeah. And that's when he was justifying it with, well, we're already stealing garbage, so why not steal the good stuff? But what I'm talking about is when he's at the Gusteau's restaurant in Paris, and his brother rediscovers him, and he shares some food with his brother. He tries to get him to taste, two different things, and get the combination, the flavor combinations, all this stuff. And then the brother comes back the next time with a handful of other rats. Mm-hmm. And then the next time he comes back with even more rats. And then I think this happens 2 or 3 times.
It does.
And Remy, I think, feels guilt at allowing these rats to come and take advantage of this. He even tells us, but I told you not to tell anyone. But every time, more and more rats come. And I think this is sort of the transition or the turn with Remy, where he does realize that, hey, he's kind of doing a bad thing. And he's sort of abusing the access that he has and the trust that Linguini has in him. But he also used that as a vehicle for vengeance later on when he feels that Linguini has done him wrong.
Yeah. And so I think if we follow that thread, there is no real resolution to that, which seems fairly consistent with a lot of animated movies. We have this real big tension, and then some other related but not some of the related event happens, and the other thread's forgotten. And so now Linguini and Remy are buddies again, and they're cooking again, and it's like, well, I didn't actually think about that particular aspect of it, and that's an interesting thing. One of the things that I thought was interesting, when you listen to the beginning, Gusteau was talking how anyone can cook, but to excel, you've got to be fierce in your commitment to be the best. So we already have this sort of statement of equality, but then exceptionalism. Everybody can do this thing, but only the best can succeed and be. Everybody could play basketball. Everybody could throw the hoop in the air and maybe make a basket. Not everybody can be Jordan or Magic or Larry Bird. So same thing with cooking. Everybody can cook, everybody can bake, but not everybody's going to be exceptional. So there is, to me, in the beginning, a presence of this, and it's interesting to look at this with these particular sets of views, this level of equality that seems to be the rage now. There's a built-in inequality. Remy is a rat like all the other rats, yet his own characteristics are, his taste buds are wildly superior from all the other rats who basically just want whatever hot garbage they can find to live to the next day. So there's this mock-up of equality and inequality.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take. And I think that the whole point of Gusteau's Anyone Can Cook is meant to be read one way at the beginning of the film, and then Ego at the very end finally realizes what if you look at it a different way, that's probably what Gusteau really meant. Because initially he's like, Ego was saying anyone can cook as if it's this pie in the sky utopian fantasy that anyone can acquire this skill and no innate talent or any, drive or anything is necessary. But by the end, Ego says, he really meant that anyone who really wants to and really works at it and has the proper skills and the proper talents and the proper, innate abilities or what's it called? The potential, and maximizes that potential. They are the ones who can cook and cook well.
I agree with the idea. I think that's what Gusteau was referring to in the beginning, that there are families all over the planet who are parents who are feeding their kids. Now, are they feeding them really fabulous gourmet food, or are they just nice? Or are they just put food on the table? So sustenance versus fine dining, cooking versus cooking. And I think Gusteau is making that distinction that to become exceptional, which is what Remy's goal is. Remy has this burning fire to create culinarily, where there are others who the artists and the architects and any other really developed talent, we would assume on some level that person had an inkling to do that over all of the other opportunities of employment. The architect chose architecture over digging ditches. Maybe there's a skill to digging ditches I don't know about, but digging a ditch or building a building and then building the Taj Mahal, that's not the same thing. Cooking and cooking is not the same thing. I think I'm reading Ego's comprehension exactly opposite of yours, that in the beginning, Ego, hence the name, has just this hugely inflated concept of what cooking has to be. And at the end, with this, so yes, spoiler alerts galore, the dish he's served when he gives the fair warning, I'm coming to dinner tomorrow, do your worst. So they serve him Ratatouille. The name of the film. It really is just a vegetable stew. What can you do to this basic provincial vegetable stew to make it more than that? And Ego eats a bite, and in that Proustian moment where the food now is a time-traveling element, he's 4 years old at the door of his mom's house, and the comfort and nourishment of her ratatouille is exactly what this grumpy old man just ate. And now he realizes anyone can cook because it's just from it is a skill, but there's also a level of love that goes into that negates some hoity-toityness. And so I'm seeing the exact opposite, that everybody can cook, and there still is a way to take that a step higher.
Wow, that is interesting, because I still see it the other way.
Well, a good thing I'm not a lawyer.
Because at the end, it's Remy's ability to basically tap into that subconscious connection. Like, you can hear a song and it'll transport you back to 15, 20, 30 years ago when you first heard it, or a moment when it was indelible in your mind. And it's like a time travel mechanism. And I think that's what the skill that went into making that ratatouille, that peasant's dish, that really brought him back to his roots, because it was so well done. It was so perfectly executed.
And then that's all he eats.
Right. Yeah.
But now it's just, right, that again. So let me just, nobody tries, really. Nobody sets out, because you don't know who's in the dining room. Nobody sets out on purpose to make that dish. But on some level, we're always trying to make that dish be the dish that either it serves as the vehicle for memory of some point 30 years ago, where grandma's house, auntie's house, mommy's house, whatever it was, or that particular dish becomes the thing 15 years from now. It's like, they tried, but it just wasn't the thing that time. And I've actually, in many, many years of cooking, on very rare occasion, a note from, or a verbal message from the customer to the waitstaff to me was, this guy was transported. You try to do it, but you can't do it on purpose. You just you do your best. So we want to talk about the food a little bit. Let's talk about the food a little bit. There's a scene where Remy is eager. Gotta get out of this kitchen. One of these cooks is going to find me, and I'm going to be dead. And he runs by the stock pot, which we have seen Linguini taste the soup. And even a cook with no cooking skill recognizes, wow, this is bad. And Remy runs by it and smells it and goes, oh my God, this is terrible. So he has this, you can see the sort of proverbial cook's wheels turning. That, all right, what's it say? Smell this, it needs this, taste this. And one of the things I found really interesting was that's what happens. There is, I don't know much about, I know about writing, but these other crafts, I don't really know much about them. But in the food craft, when you've got flour, a lump of butter, and you got some sugar, what do you make? You've got sausage and peppers and onions and just these things. What do you do with that? How do you take these things and make them sort of the whole gestalt more than the sum of their parts? And the animators did a spectacular job of showing Remy walking around, thinking, doing this with his fingers. I do the same thing. I think, wait, what? And I really think I laughed sort of in spite of myself that's yes, that's it. That's the cook's creative process. The mind's going, so it's what flavors, what do I know goes with this? And sometimes you've got to think way far away from what sounds reasonable, and you make these bridges, and then you've got a thing.
Oh, and speaking of transporting people, this show is also on the Launchpad Media, so check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com, where you'll find all sorts of other shows, including this one, The Last Nighters.
Smoother than others.
Thank you, sir. All right, so you brought up Gusteau a little bit, and let's talk about him just a bit more, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
He is the best of the best, and they open the entire film with, if they were to make it today and base it in the United States, and they said the words, the best food is American food, and the best city in America for food is New York City, or whatever, it would be considered like nationalism or something, evil, right? Something really bad. But they say, in this movie, the French food is the best food, and the best food is in Paris, and the best restaurant is Gusteau's restaurant, and he's the best of the best. And he wants to make it easier for the average person to get good results. As he says, anyone can cook. And this reminds me of how products are brought to market by entrepreneurs trying to satisfy the needs and wants of consumers. And when there's a new thing that kind of comes around, it's the first early adopters, like the rich, if you will, who are buying these things. And if they're decent products and they're profitable products, then more and more competitors will join into that industry, driving the price of it down and the quality of it up so that it becomes something that is more accessible to the masses, to the consumers. And that's sort of how I viewed Gusteau in trying to bring good food and the ability to cook good food to the masses. So it's not just for the aristocratic types.
Maybe. So there's at least two things. I know a very little bit about the French and their passion for their food. And it's probably easy to argue that one of the best French chefs ever was Paul Bocuse, who died recently. He was in Lyon. Lyon is a big hotspot for food in France. We don't know about it here, but it's the thing. Lyonnaise potatoes. It's a big place for onions. Daniel Blue is from Lyon. There's a whole handful of chefs who are from Lyon. And the interesting thing about Bocuse was he wrote a pretty high-end cookbook for the masses of classical French cuisine. He also produced a variety of cookbooks for anyone can cook kind of things. And even if you bought all of those books, if you had the money and the inclination and you were in Lyon, you would go there because there's an experience at the 5-star restaurant, even if you own the books, that you can't reproduce from the books. This is the same argument that says if you want real Italian food, even if it's just spaghetti and red sauce, you need to be in Italy. Because part of eating really spectacular Italian food is being in Italy, because it's not just what's on the plate. It's the smell of the city and the sounds of the city and the clinking of the silverware of everything that's part of that experience is part of being in Italy and getting Italian food. That's probably a bit silly to sort of, it's not a logical line of thought. We wouldn't say it, I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense, actually, because I used to go to a lot of sporting events, and granted, watching them on TV, especially with HD and all the new camera angles they have, you actually get a better view, and you can see the action and the replays and the commentary and the announcers and all that on TV, and it's a better viewing experience. But
yeah,
it's far different being in the same building as Jordan in his prime, than watching him on TV.
I saw Jordan play the Heat in Miami. I saw Bird play the Heat in Miami. Being in the place, I watched college football in Tallahassee for years. Being surrounded by 85 of your closest friends that you've never met really changes the experience of the game. Because it's just, you don't yell and scream yourself hoarse at home. Well, speaking for myself anyway.
My brother does. But
there's the participation of association, whether it's a sporting event or 5-star dining or whatever else you're doing. It's just, there's something about being at the place and experiencing everything that is more than just the reason you went there. The screaming idiots and the fans and the peanut vendor who's got the dead eye from 75 seats. It's just that's fun stuff.
Yeah. I remember growing up, there was a guy who was the peanut guy. He would sell at the Kingdom at the Mariners games, and he would do the behind the back and all these crazy antics, and he could really just throw it on a dime, 100 feet away.
It's worth watching.
Yeah, it was great. It was great being there, and as a kid, it's like that's half of the fun is being there for the experience and being with the energy of the crowd. Not so much for the Mariners, as they weren't very good when I was growing up. But I did go.
Did something change?
They had a good 5 or 6 year run from 1995 to 2001.
Okay, I don't baseball.
Well, they made the playoffs in 95. It was the refuse to lose season, and they were going to move to California. But because they pulled it out, I think from 10 games down against California Angels, and they won a 1-game playoff, single elimination to get into the playoffs against them. That is what sort of cinched it for the financing for the new baseball stadium that was built. With taxpayer money. So, at the time I was like all for it, but now I look back, I'm like, man, what a misallocation of resources of stolen funds.
So speaking of stealing, one of the things you mentioned, so the rats, the father whose name I didn't get, the father's view on taking the food of the humans, I think he felt no problem whatsoever with that. And he had information Remy didn't have. and was initially not supportive of Remy's decision to engage with humans, and said, "Son, let me show you something." And they went up and looked at the exterminator's business, and in the front window, illuminated by the lightning and the rainstorm, are dozens and dozens of rats on traps and every kind of poison you could think of. And that was the moment for me that it was the dad's rationale. I'm taking the food from the humans no matter what, because the humans are going to do anything they can to kill me. And this is just part of the game that it is. And this is one of those things, is I'm listening to the father talking about, we take their food because that's the way it's always done. And Remy, who is taking a very, very anti-war position here, but why? Why can't we just get along? I'm not listening to Rodney King. I'm listening to Scott Horton and John McCain. I'm thinking, wait a minute, stop. Because it sounds like the father is being this sort of neocon. We're at war because we're always at war. And I thought, no, this can't be what they intended, but it's an interesting observation. He ended up changing his tune because it's a cartoon movie. That's why he changes his tune. Because it's in the script.
That's another one that's interesting, because I actually view that a little bit differently than you do. And I'm not saying that I'm going to have to think about your position on this, because I think it has some merit. But how I initially read that scene was, he goes to show Remy that the humans are their enemies. They're actively trying to kill the rats. And he shows them basically the proof of it. And it's the reason why they stick to the garbage, because that's what's available. That's what's they're able to access without too much human interaction. And he's trying to tell Remy, hey, here's why we don't interact with the humans. This is why we don't go into their kitchens and steal the fresh food. This is why we take what they're already throwing out.
Well, that's a valid point.
But anyway, it's an interesting take, and that's what's so fun about how you can look at a piece of art. And I think film is an art. Some of it is garbage art, but others, are quite good. And this isn't a bad film by any stretch, but it is very much open to interpretation. It's very subjective. And the writers and the creators might have had a certain intention with this scene, or even with how we both viewed Anyone Can Cook slightly differently at the front end and the back end of the movie. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be interesting to see what was intended and then compare that to what, how other people read it.
I almost think that a movie like this, or like, I think animated more than live action, because animated, I think the vehicle limits what you can do, versus live action. You can do a lot more. You can create more tension with acting and dialogue. And I think the cartoon, I sort of think that I'm not right, but it feels to me like it limits it a little bit. I think that for this movie, the real fun part and the sort of the germ of the movie was, let's make this rat cook and then engage with this human, and let's fill out either side of the story a little bit. But I think, to me, it feels like that was the whole idea. Now, how do we turn this into a movie and not just one of those cute little 10-minute shorts?
Oh, I don't know if it's true. So they have the kernel, right? Yeah. And they're like, all right, we got to flesh this out a bit so that we get 90 minutes minimum, or up to 2 hours of content. That sounds plausible to me, because you can see these. Even Pixar does these Pixar shorts, and they're 5 or 10 minutes, and it's a little encapsulated story, and you watch that, and you get the whole thing, and it makes sense. It wraps up neatly.
Some of them are really, really good.
Yeah, I agree.
They're short. It's like, wow, I'm glad I watched that.
Yeah, and it conveys so much in such a short amount of time.
Right.
Very different than this movie, which my wife and I were watching it again last night, because this was, like a last minute change up to the plans here. And I was even watching it via YouTube. It's a movie that I had purchased, and purchased movies I can watch on Vudu or Amazon Prime or Movies Anywhere or iTunes or YouTube sometimes. And one of the advantages of watching on YouTube is I can change the playback speed. So I was watching this at 1.25 to 1.5 speed, kind of changing it up here and there, to just try to get through it, because I've seen it a couple of times already. We've already done a show on it in the past. I just wanted a refresher and get some notes down.
Right.
And we were pausing it a lot because I was taking notes, but it took us almost 3 hours to get through it. And there were about 45 minutes left, and we were like, all right, let's just go to bed, watch the rest in bed. So it really dragged on, this movie. And I don't know why. It's like, there's not too many, plot elements really going on here, but there's sort of like these little side kind of things going on. And maybe a lot of those could have been cut out, I would imagine. But I wanted to ask you brought up the soup and how Remy could go buy the soup and smell it and do the thinking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept saying, he's ruining the soup. He's ruining the soup. So speaking of rat soup, I sent you a story, and it's from one of those, probably labeled as fake news sites, one of those viral, get as many clicks as I can. Here's a list of 10 things, but I'm only going to show you one thing per page. So you got to give me all those clicks. Those. Yeah, they're so annoying. I avoid those like the plague. See, there's a rat play on that.
Boom.
Man, I'm terrible. But apparently a rat had fallen into some chowder in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is actually very close to me.
Say chowder.
And I don't know if it's true, but it became, very, very relevant to today's discussion as a result of being in the recent and local news.
Well, it's really the timing was very funny. You had no way of knowing that in one of my cooking threads, there was a story about. It's just so stupid. Some cook discovered a cat that had been in the fryer for 4 weeks. So a couple of things. How do you know it was 4 weeks unless you know you didn't change the fryer for 4 weeks? And that's just gross. Unless the fryer was on when you weren't there, which is possible. Why did the cat not get out of the fryer? The idiocy is just too much. But just so I don't think that's a true story. I responded back to you that there used to be tales in my former town of rats falling into the fryers at Kentucky Fried Chicken, which have pressure cooker fryers, so they can't fall in, or mice and cockroaches and cigarette butts and soda bottles. And I think most of those the picture of the soda bottle, I think some of them have been proven to be faked just to win a lawsuit, which you don't win when you're discovered to be a liar.
Are you talking about the bonsai kittens?
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know if I want to know what that is.
Oh, I'll find some bonsai kitten imagery and put it on the show notes page. I think it was an internet hoax, but you know how bonsai trees, they trim them to grow in a certain shape in a certain way. And so what this was allegedly putting kittens into glass bottles or shaped bottles and growing the kitten in there. So you'd feed them and extract their excrement and whatnot. And the kitten would grow into the shape of the bottle. And I think it was satire meant to be some kind of a joke. And I think it even got into some trouble with PETA or someone like that, or some group like that. But I wonder if I can find it maybe on the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive.
No, I have to admit, I know nothing of this. This sounds both hilarious and horrific at the same time.
I think that's what they're going for.
Well, it's got to be a joke. I mean, it does.
Yeah, I don't think they'd survive, even with the feeding and being able to relieve them. When their muscles atrophy and when they basically just die as a result of.
Well, I'm sure the meowing and caterwauling would be just enough to say, "Fine, you're done. Get out," and just. Oh God.
All right. So speaking of the rat soup, I'm reminded of the Pulp Fiction line, sewer rat may taste like pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to know because I never eat the filthy motherfucker.
That's right.
So this is a not safe for the kids at home episode. But I did want to add that when we did the Ratatouille episode a couple of years ago, I also watched the Morgan Spurlock film Rats around the same time, and we discussed it in that episode. And in that Morgan Spurlock film, I learned that rats leave a trail of urine wherever they go, and this is a form of communication for the colony of rats that they travel with, they run with. And so anytime you see a rat, just know that everywhere he's been, there's a trail of urine where the rat has gone. So they are rather disgusting. They can also eat through almost anything, even metal, and they can fit their heads through something like a tiny hole. If they can fit their skull through it, they can fit the rest of their body through.
Yeah, that part I know.
So that's pretty gross.
It is pretty gross.
All right. Speaking of something that's gross, they mentioned just very briefly in passing, one of the patrons in the restaurant orders foie gras. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit because I have a slight personal story, and that was when I was living in Seattle. I went to a restaurant, and there were people protesting outside because this restaurant served foie gras.
Okay.
There were people like cruelty to animals, and someone was dressed in a duck suit and all of this. Why would somebody be upset about foie gras? Do you know?
The manner in which it is created sounds pretty terrible if you're a goose. They take a funnel. Well, start with the modern. They take a funnel with a hose on the end, and they force feed the geese some manner of food. I don't know that, and I don't know what's in the food now. Back many thousands of years ago, the way people sort of figured this out was happening was geese in Egypt would gorge themselves on figs. I mean, just not stop eating, like my daughter and donuts. And what they found out was that these figs would grow, the livers would grow huge, 10 times the size. And all of that fat in the liver, oh, well, man, is it good. So the geese sort of did this to themselves, and we just sort of helped them along. So I haven't seen it done. I've not been to a farm. I eat veal. I know that there's a big protest against that. It sounds like a terrible, terrible thing. I haven't asked a goose. I don't know.
I wonder if they just left them in a room full of figs, if they would just take care of it for themselves.
They might. I don't know. I would like to find out.
Yeah.
As a fig-fed goose, even the meat would probably be really yummy, and it'd be worth finding out.
Right. Now, one of your recent episodes, you had a biochemist on.
I did.
And I think he was talking about eating organ meat and how it's different depending on how soon after the animal has died, that it changes the flavor of the meat. So is that also part of how foie gras works? Like, is it more of an immediate thing, or is it still good if you prepare it a week or two later? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, well, unless you're on a farm, you're not. I'm speaking a little bit out of my depth, but I'm pretty sure that unless you're living on a farm, dispatching your own animals, what you're buying in the store is at least several days old. I'm pretty sure most commercial organ meat, and really mostly we're talking about tripe and liver. I don't think and possibly sweetbreads. But you're not going to go to your local Walmart and buy lungs, or you can get intestines for sausage making, but that's not really, about chitlins, that's fine. That's not my thing. Brains, I've had lamb brains. They came frozen. So a lot of these things, just due to the nature of what commercial butchering is.
Brain is sweetbread? Is that what that
No,
is?
it's two different glands. Sweetbread is the thymus gland, and that's in calves. And as the animal grows older, they atrophy. Again, it's one of these. It's very, very rich. It has almost no texture. Whereas if you're cutting into, say, any kind of a steak, a skirt steak, a flank steak, a New York, a porterhouse, there's texture, there's grain to the meat. Sweetbread brains have no grain. There's just this gland with just lots of fat and stuff. Liver doesn't have any grain. Beef liver, calf's liver is really the one we're looking for as far as livers go. I don't know. I think probably it's going to be frozen because usually you're not going to get the whole thing. A big calf's liver is a big thing. What do I do with all this? So you buy a slice or two. It's probably been frozen. That may be something to do with FDA and managing pathogens and all kinds of other stuff. But the biochemist is named Kyle. Kyle's point isn't restricted to liver, but his point about liver was made because it is such a store of toxins, because it cleans the blood. It has all of this stuff in it that as it sits, all of this stuff needs to go someplace. Well, it doesn't have any way out, so it just sort of breaks down its environment. It's an ungracious host, those toxins are. So if you're going to eat liver as close to dispatch of the animal as possible, except in the case if we take like chicken livers. I think there may be something to do with the age of the animal. Chickens are pretty young when they're killed, and foie gras has all of that extra fat. I mean, just like this. So a foie gras liver may be this big. It might be a pound or better. A goose liver, 3 ounces?
Oh, wow. So 4 times bigger, so 5 times bigger?
Just huge. Yeah. So I think the fat content mitigates those other complications of breakdown, and I also think a lot of that's frozen anyway.
Okay, and that episode with Kyle, is that what's the link to that?
Hang on one second.
Culinary Libertarian, I want to say 13.
I will tell you that no. I think it's 14, but let me pull up my little episode list right here. And culinarilibertarian.com/14. Biochemist dishes on fat and sugar.
All right. Well, we will post that on our show notes page here as well. Lastnighters.com/52. And speaking of Last Nighter, since it's only about an hour-long show, we are getting close to the end. We got another 15 or so minutes remaining before we need to wind it down. So let's move on to another thing, and that is Remy is hallucinating talking to the ghost of Gusteau, who is sort of a motivational speaker for Remy, basically telling him what he wants to hear, but pumping him up to go and actually do it, not just sit and mope around.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was helpful to him. But he sort of quizzes Remy on what he knows about how the kitchen runs, and they're up on the skylight looking down. And he's like, well, who is that person and what role do they have in the kitchen? And then he goes through the whole list of everyone else. How accurate would you say was the description of how the kitchen runs? I mean, did they have somebody who, was like their consultant to the script and to the creation of this to get it like dead nuts on?
Thomas Keller.
All right. I guess that answers that.
He was their consultant. So yes, it is. So here's the thing about, let's bring sports back for just a little bit. So pro football, pro baseball is just a monstrosity of an organization. College football, maybe only slightly less so, but you've got your buddies who are going to go play in the sandlot and pick up a game of football. And when you're talking about the cooking at a level like at the fictional Gusteau's or at any one of Keller's restaurants or at any really 5-star style restaurant, another one just passed away. Can't remember his name. He had Jamine was a restaurant in Paris. I think Joël Robuchon. I think he had 60 some odd cooks to feed 40 some odd people
in one kitchen.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're getting a level of skill and talent to make all of this come together versus going to your local Shoney's or Denny's or even the really sort of high-end in your area neighborhood restaurant isn't going to have, they might have a chef and a sous chef. They're not going to have the entremetier, which is the veg cook, the saucier, which is the sauce guy. Then you've got different, the poissonnier is the cook for the fish cook. All of these stations are people who have specialized, at least at the moment, for that thing. Now, that doesn't mean that the poissonnier can't move over the meat and they move all around, which is what will happen anyway, because you need to have a kitchen of talent that can do anything. But where your station is, that's your particular focus for the menu for whatever the season is. But yeah, for the movie, they got it spot on.
Oh, that's pretty good then. And I also noticed that Colette, who they had a very kind of feminist angle to her, saying that she had to like work twice as hard as any of the men to be there, and how it's run by an evil patriarchy of old white men. But she had this like set of lessons for Linguini about how keeping your station clear and, how you're going to handle a rush and like how you keep your sleeves clean and how you move your body and all those things. Are those like actually the things you learn if you're going to be working in a professional kitchen? Like those are the things that they say, hey, that's kitchen etiquette 101. You're going to learn how to do this to minimize cuts and burns and all those things.
I don't think it's 101. And the reason it's not 101 is you have to demonstrate a level of competence and earn a level of trust from your coworkers to then get those gifts. And those really are, what she's giving is really just a gift of her time and invaluable information to him so he can grow and become a better cook. So Kitchen 101 is if your shift starts at 3, be there 2:50.
Okay, so it's more of the advanced level stuff. Okay.
There's a little bit advanced level, yeah.
But it's definitely like that's high quality, good information.
Yes.
To have. That's something that you
so
work in the kitchen, you want to do things in that manner.
So anyone can cook, but I wrote it down, but to really excel, you have to be fierce and attack your craft. So Colette was fierce and she attacked her craft. There is a mindset and just a way you approach your station. If you watch these cooking shows and look at their cutting board, look around them. And when they have like the whole crew before they start cutting some of the cooks, just don't watch what they want you to watch. Look in the background. Look at the people whose stations are just a disaster. They're going soon. The people who there's an order here that has to end up here, which is not just on the plate, but on your whole prep table. So the knife, this is it sounds kind of crazy because a lot of people can't sort of grasp that this is the thing. But when you have your knife, it goes down in the same spot all the time, even to the point that the blade needs to be the same way. I always turn my blades away from me. So if I'm moving my hand on the board and I slide my hand along my knife, I'm not cutting my fingers. You might get cut because you're next to me. Oh, I'm sorry, pay attention to what you're doing, but I'm not cutting myself. And there's just this, and she used the word, there's a mise en place. Everything's in its place, but it starts with mental mise en place. You have to go into cooking at that level with a sense of order, a sense of what's going on. Even if you don't know what's being made, you know that you know that the pastry chef called out and you have some baking skills. Well, we need short dough and we need bread. What do you do first? You need to, so the short dough is the right answer because you need to work the dough, then it has to rest. The bread, you mix it, let the yeast do its thing. Now it doesn't really care about you. So there's a knowledge of a sense of order, and that knowledge also of ingredient compatibility, which is what when Remy's doing this, he's thinking. I'm laughing because that we're back to Keller really gave them good information that this is there are orders of operations in a kitchen from the minute you walk in the door. The order of operation happens on your way to the job. It's so much more than just a job. It is a lifestyle. Cooking at that level is a lifestyle.
See, now we're back to that subjective perspective on watching the film, because as somebody who's familiar with this world, this genre of professional cooking in a kitchen like this, you're seeing all this stuff that the layperson like myself would not see. I'm just seeing rats and cartoons and marionette kind of playing with the guy's hair. But I mean, there's a whole under element of all of this, what sounds to me from talking with you, very legitimate, like this is upper level how a high-end restaurant functions.
Yes. No, they nailed that part. Was spot on. They did a great job.
All right. Very interesting. Well, let's get start to wind it down a little bit here. One of the other higher level things that Colette teaches Linguini is how to get the freshest vegetables, and that's by paying bribes to the farmers to give her the first pick. And I was like, black market, baby. Yeah, that's how you get it done. That's getting the highest and best use. Somebody's willing to pay a higher price to get the pick of the litter for their restaurant, to have the highest quality ingredients, the freshest ingredients, and they're willing to make that exchange for that benefit.
So is there a question there?
No, mostly just a point.
Well, so that they put it in there is kind of funny. That they put it in there is that really does happen. So here's the problem. There's a couple of things. So it doesn't happen all the time. And most vendors who would engage in that kind of behavior would be considered, there's a very, very fine line here. Vendors who would engage in the gratuity system, for lack of a better word, would be, once that's found out by the other businesses that can't engage in that, would probably not be called anymore. There is that is viewed in the industry as just bad form.
So this would be like a market system of justice, right?
Well, there is, because if I find out that Elwood Produce Company is giving better choices to my competitor because they're paying him twice as much, and I can't afford to do that, and Robert's Produce Company has exactly the same product and he's willing to give me the product I want at the price I'm willing to pay, and it's the same as the guy who's spending double, well, you're not getting my call. And I'm going to tell somebody else, hey, you should really give Robert a call. So there is a level of this, it balances out quickly. So I have worked in restaurants and hotels where you often have liquor guys. You could get let me sell you this extra case of knockoff liquor, and so usually that happens not with a chef, because the chef's not going to do that because they haven't got time for that. If the restaurant or a hotel has a purchasing agent, well, then that's the place to watch the money, and I've seen that happen.
And that'd be like legitimately fake liquor, or would it be like liquor that fell off the truck, so to speak?
I got a case of liquor for you. Hey, come Frankie, come here.
Yeah, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other points you want to make on this movie before we get into the final summary and review and the score?
Yeah, there was one thing I thought was really interesting. I was thinking that it seems that lots of movies are, but this one seems to have a redemption level to it, which it does. Even though the business goes out of business, Linguini, Colette too, probably all three of them. There is a moment of self-actualization. Linguini realizes, I don't have a lick of talent. The rat has the talent, and the rat, through whatever his mental processes are, comes to his own with the aid of his ghost, Gusteau, his own self-realization that I'm a rat, but I have an exceptional set of skills, and I'm going to bridge the gap with my human friend and make this thing work. And Colette comes back. So they have this redemption of coming back together, work as a team, but also the redemption of know thyself, which is really, really critical for Linguini and for Remy, because they were trying very hard to be something that they weren't. And then that's followed up with the sort of has to be know thyself, and then to thine own self be true, which they finally are. And now they have harmony. I think that that's an easy overlooked, I won't say message, but something, at least an easily overlooked moment of the movie. But I think that's really kind of important to how the whole thing ends up playing out. For Gusteau's dictate, anyone can cook.
Yeah, start kidding with your tagline of the philosophy's free, but the food's on you.
Oh, the tagline. Well, I put it out to this guy I know somewhere in some island off of Washington. And I said, yeah, I need something zippy, something that's short and quick. And this guy came back with the Colonial Libertarian Podcast. The philosophy is free, but the food is on you. I think you know him.
I think I'm looking at him right now.
I think I'm looking at him right now. I don't know what you're looking at.
When I talk, it shows me on the screen.
I see.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, you do philosophize a fair amount, and you've shown that on this guest appearance.
Well,
right here as well. So very impressive. I think that's one of the draws to your show, and I highly recommend it. My wife, like I said earlier, she enjoys it very much, and even tried the gluten-free muffins, blueberry muffins recipe.
And how'd they work out?
They tasted great, but she opened the oven before they were done, and they deflated. And so she felt like she made a mistake there, but she's going to try it again and try to keep them lofty.
It is a common thing to do, to sort of proverbially stir the pot too soon and too often. Let the thing boil, let the thing bake, and just leave it be. It knows better than you what it wants.
So just try it again, give it a little bit more time.
Yep.
And you get the recipe right, you get the timings right, it'll generally work out.
It'll generally work out, and it's not going to go from bake, done to burnt like that. It's not going to incinerate in 7 seconds. It just won't happen. Generally, in the case of a thing, the better the outside is browned. Well, so in baking, browning is flavor. Flavor tastes good. Flavor is good. We want brown. We want that to happen. So just tell her, just resist the urge, go read a chapter of a book and come back or something.
All right. So it's not Mission Impossible. It's not these muffins will self-destruct in 7 seconds.
No. And that no horrible, no. Watch too much TV. No horrible thing will happen if you let it bake for another minute or two.
All right. Well, this is a good spot to do our final summary and review. I'm sure you've heard our show before. So do you have an idea of how that goes, and give it a rating 1 through 10, a decimal point deep, if you will, please?
So the as an overall, I'm probably going to go with about an 8 or 8.5. I think I mean, 10 is high. 10's too much for almost anything, but I think 8.5 is pretty solid.
All right. Well, I think you've actually already given us a pretty good summary right before leading up to that. So about 8.5.
I think so.
All right. Well, I think that this movie is really good. I'm not going to go with the 9.6 like all of the IMDb and the Metacritic and the Rotten Tomatoes and the Google users. They all seem to land on that number. And as I said in the open, this is a movie that for me, it doesn't play repeatedly very well. Like the more you watch it, the less I like it. I'm going to knock it down a peg or two. But I also don't have that underlying like nod to my expertise. You know, there's that whole undercurrent of the professional kitchen and how that all operates. And I think that somebody who works in an environment such as yourself would watch this, and that would give it, bonus points. That would make it really stand out among films as far as, hey, they get it, But, it's a Disney Pixar film. They hit all the right notes as far as the animation's beautiful. They go for the emotional angles. They have a redemption turn. And it's all basically every Pixar movie is almost the same. You just swap out the different animated animals or articles, and you put John Ratzenberger as one of the voices, and you've got another Pixar movie. So, they're all generally pretty good. They're high quality. They spend a lot of time on these things, and they innovate constantly as they're creating these. Like, they're always on that cutting edge of whatever the capacity or the capability of animation in that day and age is. Like, they are developing new techniques with each of these films that they create. And so I'm always impressed with how Pixar comes out with the latest and greatest.
It really is. It's just stunning to see how they do that. It's just one of the. It's just when the waiter is going into, so it's the point of view, waiter's going into the dining room, and if you just, and now with digital, you can pause it to look at it without any distortion, and look at the dining room and the chandeliers, and just it's just a dining room, but they've captured an elegant 5-star dining room so well, and it's not. It's just a room, but all the details to the curls of the curtains on the wall and the tables and the tablecloth. It's just they've got it down. It's formulaic, but it works. And you're right. We went and saw, what do you say, Ralph 2, and the quality of the animation and just those little things like you're welcome, Maui, whatever. It's just her hair in the water, those little things that they do in each movie, they're pushing something. It's amazing to watch.
Well said. And this, I think, will wind down the episode for The Last Nighters. The show notes and more can be found at lastnighters.com/52. Dan Reed of the Culinary Libertarian at culinarilibertarian.com. You have that website and a podcast that is now 15 episodes strong by the time this comes out.
Woohoo!
And so I do highly recommend that people do check that out. So thank you for filling in for Robert. He will be back next week with me doing 2 versions of Death Wish, the most recent one, 2018, and also the original starring Charles Bronson. So Dan, thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
I will say good night from last night.
Good night.